Well, good morning, everyone. It looks like we have a nice number of attendees with us this morning. My name is Mark Phillips, the president of VisionWorks. And VisionWorks is a team of people that does stewardship, um, increased giving programs, strategic planning programs, capital campaigns, development building programs for churches, for schools, for colleges, and hospitals. And primarily, our work is with churches across the country. And we get all kinds of invitations to come out and make presentations, more invitations than really we can respond to. So we decided to launch a webinar series to assist churches in their stewardship and fundraising and development needs. And we also figured that with the webinar technology, it was a great way of being better stewards of our resources and the world's resources. So we're offering the first in a series of webinars. And since we work probably with over 400 churches, and a common question is, what can we do to strengthen our church, to strengthen Sunday stewardship, to strengthen Sunday giving? We decided to start our webinar series and entitled it Reigniting Sunday Giving this fall. And so before we begin, we probably have some housekeeping things, some administration things that we can share with you. The first is, reduce that screen a little bit. The first is that if you get disconnected and you need to reconnect to the webinar, sometimes you can't just click the relaunch button. You have to go to the Go to Webinar box and under questions, click Launch Go to Webinar again and give it a moment and you can reconnect. So if you get disconnected, you can reconnect. Secondly, set your audio, your volume to your desired level. Thirdly, on your toolbar at the top, underneath the word webcam, you can move my web picture from the top to the side to the bottom if you like. Fourthly, in your toolbar under Zoom, you can enlarge or reduce the screen. If you'd like to enlarge the screen, you can do that. Fifthly, between the slide and my picture at the top, you'll see two white lines. And if you put your cursor on those two white lines, you can change the size of the picture and the slides together. Sixthly, we'll be taking questions as we go along. And so there's a control panel to your right. And if you'd like, you can type your questions in the control panel, and we'll try to answer as many of those as we can at the end of the webinar. And if we don't have time to answer those, we'll try to put together the answers to those and send those on to you after the webinar. And then lastly, we will mail the PowerPoint to you and the webinar video link to you after the webinar so that you can read these materials over again, so that you can watch it again if you need to, so that you can share it with other people if you'd like to. So as we begin here today, we ask ourselves, what is the goal of this webinar? And this webinar is to help primarily churches increase their Sunday stewardship and increase their Sunday giving starting immediately this fall. There's some immediate things that churches can do. There's some short-term things that churches can do. There's even some medium things that churches can do. And we'd like to offer you 10 suggestions or 10 ideas of ways that you can start increasing your Sunday giving immediately. And before we start, we'd like to find out who we're visiting with this morning. So we're going to have a couple of polls. The first poll is asking who is on our webinar. And so I'm going to open that poll for you. And you can answer the question, are you a pastor? Are you a business manager? Are you a development director? Are you a lay leader in your church or parish? Or are you a lay member? Take a moment and answer the poll that reflects your status in your community. Give it a few more seconds. Okay, we'll close the poll now. And I'm going to share the poll results with you. And it looks like about a third of us are pastors, a third of us are business managers, and the rest are development directors or lay leaders. So we have a nice variety of people with us this morning. I usually get the question, how can we strengthen our parish or increase Sunday giving? Mostly from our pastors. It seems like even though there are different church boards and parish councils and finance committees, at the end of the day, when the meeting is over, it's the pastor who really is worrying about the strength of the parish and the level of Sunday stewardship and giving. So we have another question then, a second poll. And this poll is asking, is your Sunday giving much more than you need, a little more than you need, just meeting your needs, below what is needed, well below what is needed? Take a moment now and let us know where your church lies in its Sunday giving. Hopefully you know. A few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. And I'm going to share the results with you now. So no one has more than they need. A portion of you, a fifth of you, or a sixth of you, seventh of you have a little more than you need. A third of you are just meeting your needs, and quite a few, almost 2/3, are below what is needed. We know from church studies that many churches almost have a life cycle or a lifespan. Many churches, not all of them. But when a church is built and growing, it's attracting new members, it's attracting new families, it's adding ministries, but many times the income can be above what is needed. And then it starts to slow in its growth a bit, and then it's just meeting its needs. And then after a while, the demographics can change in the neighborhood. Perhaps it gets older, perhaps people start moving out for some reason, and then churches face less income than is needed. And so every church, a lot of churches do have a life cycle or a lifespan. So this is pretty common, pretty typical. So why don't we go ahead and start then with our presentation. And we will start going over the 10 things that churches can do to increase their Sunday giving. The first thing that a church can do is to keep stewardship at the center of the church's life. And that means, number one, to keep it at the center of the pastor's life and the staff's life, but number two, to keep it at the center of the church's life. And so we know the pastor is the spiritual leader of the community. People are watching him. People can tell what's important to him. And if he really believes in the importance of stewardship and is practicing joyful, generous stewardship, it has an effect on them. I was watching a video last week about Pastor Rick Warren from Saddleback Church out in Orange County, California. And Pastor Warren has been married to his wife for 38 years. And they made an agreement when they first got married that they would tithe 10% of their earnings back to God and the church. And they decided that they would also do something a little different. They would try to increase their tithe every year. And so in good years, they'd increase their tithe 1%, 2%, 3%. In lean years, they'd increase their tithe 0.5%, but they always were increasing their tithe. And so now, after 38 years of marriage, they are giving back 91% of their income to God and the church. Now, Pastor Warren is probably making more than most of us, and we might feel like he can afford to do that. But also, you can see from Pastor Warren's life and his wife's life that they are committed to good, generous, joyful stewardship. And their story affects and impacts a lot of people. So, stewardship and the belief in stewardship, the practice of stewardship, the living of stewardship, really ideally needs to start with the pastor and the staff. But then we also need to keep stewardship in front of our people. Growing as disciples of Jesus means growing in stewardship. And this is a lifelong process. And what discipleship and stewardship mean to us at 10 or 15 years of age is different than 25 or 35 years of age, is different from 55 or 75 years of age. And we constantly have young people coming up through the church. We constantly have new families coming into the church. We have constantly people moving through different stages of their life where perhaps they're in their late working years where they're blessed with even more. And so stewardship is a lifelong process for a church community. And we need to constantly be teaching stewardship. We need to constantly be forming people in stewardship. We need to be constantly reflecting on stewardship. Now, biblical stewardship and the theology of stewardship can be slightly different for different denominations. But basically, I think most of us believe that God is the creator of all things. He is the owner of all things. He shares these things with us, and we're called to be managers and stewards. We're called each day to acknowledge each of these blessings and gifts, whether it's time or life or health or marriage or family or relationships, intellectual abilities, job skills, income, all kinds of gifts. And we're called to give a portion back to God, give a portion back to the church, give a portion back to other people. That's our I think our basic beliefs as Christian stewards. Every denomination colors it slightly differently, but we need to be sharing this message all the time in as many ways as possible. Not the whole message, but we can share parts of the message. In every Sunday sermon and homily, in every leadership meeting, in every class, in every formation program, in every outreach, we can touch on different aspects of stewardship. God has given us this beautiful day for ministry. Let us praise Him. God has given us this beautiful gift. Let us rejoice in it. God has generously shared these things with us. Let us share them with others. We can always bring out different pieces of this at different times. And so we want to be making stewardship important to us, but we also want to be constantly forming our people in stewardship, because stewardship is a lifelong process. Our churches are constantly changing places, and we need to constantly be forming ourselves and reforming ourselves in stewardship. A second very practical thing that we can do this time of year is to reconnect with people. Send out this September a reconnecting letter. We know a lot of people have been on vacation, they've been traveling. Sometimes some people take some time off from church over the summertime. And so in this September time, we can send out a letter to all of our individuals and all of our families, and we can reconnect with them, greeting them. reminding them of our church's mission, letting them know of one or two or three big plans for the year, and telling them how valuable they are. Very practically, in this reconnecting letter, ideally, you can have the pastor sign the letter in blue ink so that he or she knows that there was the pastor signed it personally. If you have a small volunteer group at the church office, you can hand address those letters. And I would also put a first class stamp at the top of those letters. Why hand address? Why put a first class stamp on it? Because people very rarely receive letters these days anymore. But when they receive something that's hand addressed, and when they receive something that has a first class stamp on it, they know that it's personal and important, and they're more likely to read it. So as your people are coming back, as school is starting again, reconnect with your church members. What's another thing that a church can do to increase Sunday stewardship and giving? Well, another thing that a church can do is to pray about it. In our worship services, in our leadership meetings, in our group meetings, in our outreach, we can have general prayers about stewardship, different aspects of stewardship, and this is important. And I think probably a lot of us do this already. But I'm going to give you one other idea, and that is to pray very specifically about stewardship. So I ran into a pastor once upon a time, and this pastor was always sent to churches that were in financial trouble. And he was kind of a turnaround artist. He lived and practiced stewardship. He called his people to stewardship, but he would get very specific about what he was doing. So, for example, one time he went to a church and it was 50 years old. The complex, the facilities were 50 years old, and they decided to do $1.5 million renovation to renovate the church and the schools and the educational facilities and the offices and the food pantry. And he prayed this kind of prayer. Lord, we praise and thank you for your many blessings and gifts. You've planted St. Paul Church here to do ministry in this part of your kingdom. We're asking to renovate our facility so that we can do ministry for 50 more years. Lord, this renovation is going to cost us $1.5 million. But Lord, I know there are people out there. And so send out your Holy Spirit, Lord, and have your Holy Spirit touch the hearts of our people. And let someone come forth with a $250,000 gift. Let a couple people come forward with $100,000 gifts. Let several people come forth with $50,000 gifts. Lord, send out your Spirit and let their hearts be touched and guided until we reach our goal so that we can strengthen your community and your church for 50 more years. Well, he prayed this Sunday after Sunday as long as this effort was going on. And he'd pray it leadership meeting after leadership meeting. And he'd pray it at men's club and women's club. And he'd pray it at educational meetings and outreach meetings until their goal was reached. That is a big goal. He would also do it for very small things. So, for example, maybe they were engaging in a $50,000 landscaping project. And again, he would pray at the worship service during the intercession time or compose his own prayer. Lord, you have called us to be your family of God in this neighborhood, and we need to spruce up the landscaping in our community so that people feel welcome here, so that it's pleasing to people as they walk by, and it's pleasing to people as they drive up. So we're engaging in this $50,000 landscaping project. Lord, send out your Holy Spirit and touch the hearts of our people. Let someone come forth with a $25,000 gift. Let a couple people come forth with two $10,000 gifts. Let several people come forth with several $5,000 gifts. And again, he would pray this prayer Sunday after Sunday, leadership meeting after leadership meeting, educational session after educational session, until his goal was reached. And so what's the beauty of this? He is a person who believes in stewardship himself. He's a person who believes in God's bounty. He's a person that believes in the good-heartedness of people. He's a person that believes that people will respond. And so when you get specific with people, people can respond specifically. If we keep our stewardship prayers general all the time, they don't have as much power to inspire us, and they surely are not specific. So consider getting very specific in your prayers with what you're looking for and with what you need. He did it, and he achieved tremendous results. Okay, it's time for another poll. And this is about an annual report. And so our poll is, does your church, your community, your school issue an annual report each year? Yes or no? Simple question. Take a moment. Think about what an annual report might be. Sometimes nonprofits issue them. Of course, colleges and universities issue them. Does your church issue an annual report? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the poll. And now we'll look at the poll. And it looks like most of you are issuing annual reports. And this is a fantastic thing to do. There's a current of thought today that's saying that churches need to be acting more like nonprofits these days. And that means that years ago, 10, 25, 50 years ago, we could count on our church members' loyalty and we could count on their goodwill. But these days, with openness, with transparency, with accountability being such huge issues, churches are becoming more and more like nonprofits. People want to know about your income. They want to know about your expenses. They want to know about your ministries and your service programs. They want to know who's being touched. They want to know that their gifts are being well used and well spent. And so you want to consider issuing an annual report each year. This can be part of your stewardship renewal, or it can be part of an increased giving program. The annual report can be issued in the fall. It can be issued after the new year. It can be issued in the spring. It can be issued in the new fiscal year starting in July. It can be issued different times. But basically, you want to have perhaps like a 4-page annual report. An 11.5 by 17 sheet of paper folded will make 4 pages. Lots of pictures, but you want to give them a simple financial report. What was your Sunday giving? What were your estate gifts? What were your special gifts for different projects? You want to let them know of the ministries that are going on, and especially some of those impactful stories of ministry. This takes a little bit of work, but there's all kinds of impactful stories. People that were touched by your worship service or a special funeral service or memorial service. Families that are touched by your educational programs. All kinds of people whose lives are touched and changed by your outreaches. Perhaps it's a food pantry, perhaps it's a church nurse, perhaps it's a church counselor. But you want to share those stories of impact with people. Let them know of 1 or 2 or 3 big goals for the upcoming year. And then remind them that God isn't done with your community. He's called you together to be a family. He's called you to worship, to share the gospel and teach, and to serve in all kinds of ways. And you've got some more plans. And you've got some things that you'd like to respond to. And you're a blessed community. And this is going to call for even greater generosity. So issue a call to a greater sense of generosity, a greater response. So one thing you can do is, if you're not, be issuing an annual report and then publicize it in all kinds of ways. Uh, you might put it on your church website. You might put it in the newsletter or the church bulletin for 2 weeks. You might have it in church, in the pews. You might go over it in a Sunday sermon or homily over a weekend. You might talk about it in your leadership meetings, in your educational groups, and that's when you're looking at the whole report. You can also break down the report and share parts of the report at different times of the year as well. So it's getting more and more difficult to rely on our people's loyalty. And in some ways, we're becoming more and more like nonprofits, and people want to know that their gifts are being put to good use. And an annual report really shows that to people and gives them confidence. So consider an annual report. A fifth thing that a church can do is to form a welcoming committee. Some of you probably have welcome committees, some of you may not, but you want to consider forming a welcome committee so that when a new individual moves into your church or a new family moves into your church, you're out to them right away. Let them know how glad you are that they're in your community. Maybe take them a welcome basket. Put together a list of things going on in the community, services in your community. Let them know the history of your church, the mission of your church, all the ministries that are taking place in your church. But this welcome committee and this outreach to them is so important. And the sooner you can do it, the better. Because what we found is that churches that have welcoming committees and get out to people ASAP are churches that have a higher level of involvement and a higher level of stewardship or Sunday giving. So if you don't have one, consider a welcoming committee. The sixth thing that you can do is tell people who their gifts help. The basic principle here is that people like to give to people, and people like to know that their gifts are helping people. With some things, it's very obvious. If you're taking up an offering for your food pantry, well, it's very obvious that their gifts are going to go to feeding hungry individuals and families in your community. But every gift eventually helps a person. And you have to make that connection. Again, this is what nonprofits do. One thing that I've heard pastors say several times is that your Sunday giving helps to keep the lights on. I kind of cringe when I hear that, because their Sunday gift really goes to so much more than that. It goes to the pastor's ministry. It goes to the ministry of all the people on the staff. It goes to the facilities that house these ministries. It goes to concrete things that make these ministries possible. So every gift eventually helps people, and you have to help people make that connection. So let me give you an example. Say we're taking up a special offering over a month to put on a new roof on our church. A new roof is an understandable thing, but how does it help people? Well, a new roof is going to keep the rain off us. A new roof is going to keep the snow off us. A new roof is going to keep the wind out. A new roof is going to keep the heat in the winter and the cool in the summertime. And so a new roof is going to help make our worship space even more pleasant, even more accommodating. It's where we gather Sunday after Sunday. It's where we hope to gather Sunday after Sunday for years to come. The new roof is going to benefit us in all kinds of personal ways. Another ordinary example is a parking lot. I was in a church one time and they needed to put down a new $300,000 parking lot. The parking lot was very wavy, but even a parking lot is helping people. A parking lot is making it so that your church looks now more inviting. and more pleasant. The parking lot that I was speaking of was actually ruining cars and hurting their suspensions. It was so bad. So you're going to have to spend less money on car problems because you're going to be able to drive easily through this parking lot. This parking lot also had holes and depressions, and in the wintertime, springtime, this snow would melt and it would pool in these pockets and these holes, and then it would ice up at night, and then sometimes people would slip and fall. So it was even becoming a safety issue for people. People didn't even like to park or go to church because of the parking lot, the condition of the parking lot, and the fear that they might fall. So everything eventually helps people. Some things are a little more difficult to discern, but if you think about it, even a roof, even a parking lot, even tuck pointing, even landscaping help people. And then there are these obvious ministries and projects that help people. But people like to give to people to so show them how, make the link how their gift is helping other people. To go along with that, something very practically that you can start this Sunday, this month, is what I call a Sunday offering tie-in. So we're at the worship service, we're at the liturgy, the sermon is over, it's time to take up the Sunday offering. And what's a great thing to do is for the pastor to go out in front of the community. And if he's got 2 or 3 services, then he does this 2 or 3 times over the weekend. But he goes out in front of the community, he takes the basket, he drops his offering envelope in the basket, and then he lets them know that they are important to this community and that this week your gift is going to help X, Y, or Z, and that we're grateful and inspired by your gift. So let me give you an example. It's worship service. The pastor goes out in front of the people. He has the basket or she has the basket. They drop the offering in the basket, and he or she lets them know that their gift is important. And then he says, "Our school is starting again, and we have 300 kids in school, and these 300 kids are having the gospel shared with them. They're growing as good citizens. Their families are being touched. Their extended families, their neighbors are being touched by these Christian kids. And so your gift this week is going to help share the gospel with these 300 kids in our school." Now, I will tell you honestly, I don't think most people have an awareness about all the ministries that are taking place in their church community. And so you have 52 Sundays a year, 52 opportunities, 52 weekend opportunities to share the different ministries going on in your community each week. This week, it might be school. Next week, it might be Sunday school. The week after, it might be adult education. The next week, it might be Bible study classes. The next week, it might be the church nurse. The next week, it might be the church counselor. The next week, it might be the outreach programs, the food programs, the unemployment programs. There are lots of ministries going on in churches that people don't know about. Some smaller churches might have 20 ministries. Some other churches might have 100 or 150 ministries, but I'll guarantee you, most people don't have an idea of how many ministries are going on in their church. So every Sunday, and 52 Sundays a year, you have an opportunity to share one ministry that's going on in your community. And so your Sunday gift this Sunday, your Sunday offering this Sunday is going to help fund this ministry or that ministry or the other ministry. It's a wonderful thing to do. Again, people want to know that people want to help people. People want to know that their gifts are helping people. They want to make an impact. And so make that connection for them right before the Sunday offering or the Sunday collection. Okay, we have another poll because we're going to get in now. We're going to get into stewardship renewal and increased giving programs. So let's look at another poll. And the poll is, have you ever run an increased giving program, or do you run stewardship renewal in your parish? A, stewardship renewal. B, increased giving program. C, have you done both? D, have you done neither? Take a moment now and fill out that poll. Okay, we'll close the poll here in a minute, in a moment. And now I'll share the results with you. Well, very good. It looks like a lot of people have done stewardship renewal. A fifth of you have done increased giving, and 40% have done both. And it looks like everyone is active, so no one is not doing anything. So fantastic. So the first thing that we can talk about is an increased giving program. Stewardship renewal, done at those different times that I mentioned, fall, January, spring, July. Stewardship renewal usually is increasing the financial gifts 1 or 2 or 3% each year. But sometimes some churches, some parishes need a lot more than that. And basically, I would say after probably being in 275 plus different churches, and our group having worked in 400 and some plus churches, that most Christians are on autopilot. Most Christians are on autopilot. And that means that we really are not increasing our giving from year to year. We're really not reviewing what we've been blessed with, and we're not increasing that giving. Again, if some churches are having real difficulty, then they need to consider an increased giving program, because an increased giving program can increase your giving 10 to 25%. So an increased giving program is more than stewardship renewal. Stewardship renewal is taking about 4 weeks of prayer and reflection, 4 weeks of preaching, 2 to 4 weeks of commitment to reflect on the biblical teachings of stewardship, the theology of stewardship, to reflect on time, talent, and treasure, to have some pastor talks, some lay witness talks, and then to ask people to commit in ministry and giving for 2 to 4 weeks. Again, that increases Sunday giving 1 or 2 or 3% each year. We know that a capital campaign is used for special projects, building a new church, renovating a church, building a new school, buying some land, paying off debt. So you're selling these different projects to your community, 6 weeks of prayer and preaching and reflection, 4 weeks of commitment. You could say that an increased giving program falls in the middle. It's more than stewardship renewal. It's less than a capital campaign. But what you're doing is you want to be selling your community, its mission, its history, its ministries. You want to be selling your community to itself. And you're asking people to consider an increased and significant increase in their giving. So stewardship renewal can go on for 4 or 5, or increased giving can go on for 4 or 5 weeks. It's the pastor speaking, it's lay witness talks, it's sharing an annual report with them, it's looking at all the different ministries, it's newsletter inserts, it's bulletin inserts, it's prayers at worship and liturgy, and it's 2 to 4 weeks of commitment with letters to different groups of people in your church. Some people are giving very generously. Some people are giving sporadically, some people are not giving at all. And so there's tailored letters to the different groups of people in your church asking them and suggesting even a significant increase. But an increased giving program is selling your community to your community. And what I suggest is something like this. Keep hitting that button. What I suggest is that perhaps if a church is struggling or in difficulty, they do an increased giving program in year one, and then in year 2, 3, and 4, they follow up with stewardship renewal. So again, stewardship renewal is 4 weeks of preaching and prayer and reflection, 4 weeks of commitment, talking about time, talent, and treasure. Again, you'll get a 1 or 2 or 3% increase. But start off with the increased giving program in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, do stewardship renewal, and then come back at it again in year 5 with an increased giving program, selling your community and its ministries to your people. Because again, most of us are on autopilot. And why does this mini campaign, this increased giving program, need to be of more significant duration? Well, we have an old saying in church work that second collection efforts get second collection results. And so if we do 1 or 2 or 3 weekends, a little bit of reflection, a commitment card for a couple weekends, you're not going to receive very significant increases in commitment. You have to show people in worship, in liturgy, through your prayer, through your preaching, through your reflection, through the number of weeks that you spend on this, that this is important to them. And so that's why an increased giving program can really yield more significant results. Then follow it up year after year after year with stewardship renewal. But again, this is something you need to be doing for the rest of your church's life. Now we have another poll. We have our 10th suggestion that's coming along here, and we want to look at different ways of giving. And so we're going to launch our last poll. And the poll asks, what means does your community use to receive its weekly or monthly gifts? And check all those things that apply to you. Do you use the Sunday envelope? Do you use electronic funds transfer from the bank? Do you make credit cards and the credit card option available? Do you have giving kiosks in your church? Do you have a mobile phone app? Take a moment and mark those things that pertain to you and your community. Okay, I'm going to get ready to close the poll, and I'm going to show you the results. Of course, everyone uses the Sunday envelope, and surprisingly, everyone uses electronic funds transfer. Fantastic. Some of you use credit cards. So let's talk about these different options. You know, 10, 15 years ago, when I would go out and work with different churches, a lot of people still weren't using computers, personal computers. They weren't using the internet. They weren't using email. Now, when I go out to churches, even the oldest people are using the computer, internet, and email. They're using technology. We also know that young people today especially are using technology. Basically, everything is going to take place on your phone. And we're going to see phones get larger and larger. They're becoming handheld personal computers. But young people are very well acquainted with technology today, and they expect to use technology today. And so 10, 15 years ago, when I would go out to different churches, we still had to do a lot of work with paper. because people weren't familiar yet with computers and internet and emails. And the good news is that Sunday giving is increasing each year. Did you know that? Sunday giving is increasing each year, and but it's not increasing hardly at all for people that are just using paper, people that are just using the Sunday envelope. So we have to be offering other kinds of giving, other means of giving to people. So if you're going to use the Sunday envelope, and it still is probably the basis for a lot of church communities, I would probably migrate away from the yearly packet of Sunday envelopes because it's too easy for people to put those in drawers and forget about them. Instead, through your church envelope company, have those Sunday envelopes sent out in packets every month or every 2 months. Now, sometimes churches have to make decisions. If you have a thousand households in your church and there are 400 households that you don't have a record of giving anything on, you may not send out these Sunday packets to them. You may just have envelopes in the church, in the pews, in the music rack. But definitely, you want to consider um, sending out monthly packets or bi-monthly packets. You always want your brand or your logo on those envelopes because then it comes as a constant reminder to people, and it's too easy just to put aside and forget about. These little packets, monthly or bi-monthly packets, get used a lot more than the yearly envelope packet. Secondly, you want to consider electronic funds transfer, and you want to get more and more people signed up with electronic funds transfer if you can. You might do it at increased giving times. You might do it at your stewardship renewal times. You might do it different Sundays during the year. You might make it available every Sunday through your church newsletter, your church bulletin, through papers and cards left in the pews, through papers and cards at the back of church. You want to encourage more and more people to be using electronic funds transfer. I myself had my check stolen a few years ago. I do not use checks anymore. I don't have any checks. If I need a check, I have to go to the bank and get a check. And so more and more people are using electronic funds transfer, but also we know people's church going habits are changing. Most of the people that are active in your community are there over 3 weekends. It's not good just to make an announcement or put something in the newsletter once. You need to do it twice or 3 times. But you have 50 or 60% of people coming every Sunday, 10 or 20% coming every other Sunday, 10 or 20% coming every third Sunday. And, we know people have busy lives. This Sunday, they might be in church with you. Next Sunday, they might be out of town at Grandma and Grandpa's and go to church with them. And the next Sunday, they might be out of town again, going to a graduation ceremony at a cousin's. And so if you're only offering Sunday envelopes and not electronic funds transfer, then you're only receiving maybe a third or 2/3 of what you could be receiving from certain families. So be offering that electronic funds transfer option at stewardship renewal times, but you could offer it every weekend or in the back of church and be urging people more and more to sign up that way. Another way is through the credit card. Now, you have to be careful about credit cards, and people have different sensitivities about credit cards. I like credit cards. I like the record at the end of the month. I pay mine off immediately. I know a lot of people do. I like the points. I use Southwest Airlines, so I like the Southwest points. In fact, I had a man in one church, he made a gift of $60,000 to his church, and he put it on 6 different credit cards so that he could get the Southwest airline points. Well, that's 2 or 3 or 4 trips across the country on Southwest Airlines. So you want to make the credit card option available to people who might like to use that. Another new thing that's coming along, and I think you've seen these in different places, is if you've gone to if you've gone to concerts, if you've gone to civic events, you might, if you've been in malls, you might see these kiosks. And these kiosks are a stand with a touch screen. And so you might have a giving kiosk in the back of your church or at the entrance of your church, maybe in your office, maybe in your social hall. And so if they're not using checks or cash anymore, that person can go to that giving kiosk and make his gift through his bank or make his gift through his credit card that Sunday immediately right there. So you might consider giving kiosks. And then the last thing that you might consider is more and more, again, the phone being the platform of choice, you might consider, if you're a larger church, a mobile phone app. Now, different denominations might group together and make these apps available, but I have actually seen some pastors at worship time, at offering time, tell people to get out or encourage people to get out their Sunday offering, but also to get out their phone and go to their Sunday giving app and make their Sunday gift right there on the phone. This is going to be something that more and more young people like to use. Some people have 200, 250 apps on their phone. And one of the things that you can use is your Sunday giving app. So remember, Sunday giving is increasing. Paper giving, the envelope is kind of staying stable, but all the other means are increasing, and they all involve technology. And so consider using these other technological means to take advantage of people's changing habits in worship and to take advantage of people's changing habits in use of money. So technology can be a great thing. So we have gone through 10 things now. Let's look at those 10 things. We want to make stewardship important in our own lives, starting with the pastor and the staff, but we want to make stewardship important in the life of our church or parish. Working it in some way every Sunday, every leadership meeting, every ministry meeting, every outreach. We can work in stewardship. Secondly, this September, when the families are coming back and the kids are heading off to school, we can send out a reconnecting letter to them. Thirdly, we need to be praying about all kinds of good Christian stewardship and different aspects of Christian stewardship. But if we're doing special projects, we need to really get specific about it and ask the Lord to send out the Holy Spirit to touch people's hearts, to make the kinds of gifts that we're looking for. They're out there. And to keep praying about it until that goal is met. Fourthly, we can use annual reports, and we want to give these annual reports as much publicity as possible. Put them on the websites, put them in the bulletins and newsletters for a couple weeks, lead them in church, make presentations on them at all your leadership meetings, your educational meetings, your ministry meetings for a month or 2 months. Fifthly, if you don't have one, consider a welcoming committee to get out there ASAP when someone registers in your church. Sixthly, to always be thinking about how your gift, their gifts are helping people, making a difference in people's lives, because eventually every gift really is given for people and to help people, whether it's a roof or a parking lot or a new bathroom in the back of church or new school, addition, social hall, whatever. Every gift is going to help people. Sometimes these gifts help people in lots of ways. So let people know that. Number 7, at the worship service, before the offering is taken up, you can let people know how their offering is going to help and help a certain ministry this week or affect people's lives this week. And there's 52 weeks and 52 ministries you can touch on. Sixthly, eighth, if your church is really struggling, you may consider an increased giving program, because an increased giving program is going to sell your mission, your history, your ministries to your people. It's going to report to them. It's going to be a very significant amount of prayer and reflection, and it's going to ask them for a significant response. Ninth, We know that stewardship needs to be part of our life and the church's life for as long as the church is here. And 10th, you want to consider maybe more and more electronic giving options. The Sunday envelope for sure. The electronic funds transfer, you can put that on your website. You can give people paper to sign up. The important thing with the electronic funds transfer and the credit card is make sure that your church logo is put on the web page, is put on those pieces of paper, not just the bank information, but your church logo on the electronic funds transfer information and the credit card information. Your gifts will be doubled if you brand it with your church logo and make it look very much like it's coming from your church. So Sunday envelopes, but especially monthly and bi-monthly packets, electronic funds transfer, the consideration of credit cards, a giving kiosk, and even perhaps a phone app. So those are 10 things. Those won't work for every church. If you're a pastor or a business manager, you can take these things to your office and you can read over them and think about them. You can share them with your staff. You can share them with your leaders. And then you can ask yourselves, what can we start integrating into the life of our church to start increasing the sense of stewardship and to start increasing our Sunday giving and to start increasing the level of generosity in our people. Okay, I think now we have some questions here over at the side, and I'll take a few moments to answer some of these questions. Okay, the first question is a very good question these days, is what can we do with different ethnic groups? Well, the United States is a country of different ethnic groups. We have Hispanics from Latin and South America. We have people coming from Eastern Europe, a lot of Poles. In certain communities, we have Asians and East Asian Pacific Islanders and people from Africa. And many times their churches are funded differently than our churches, and they're not as perhaps organized, and they don't have the regular organized means of giving, and that this hasn't been stressed to them. They're generous people, they're good people. But I was in one place, and the bishop there was dealing with a group of people who were 70% Hispanic, all different kinds of Hispanic groups. And he said, our people have money and our people are generous, but we haven't trained them to give. And so it's our region's project. It's going to be our church's project to be teaching stewardship to these people, to be teaching regular and planned giving to people so that we can train them up to give like the rest of us might be giving. And so this is going to be a constant stewardship effort. One thing that I've seen churches do immediately is some people don't like to register for whatever reason. Some people don't like using bank accounts. Some people don't like putting their names and addresses on different cards for lots of reasons. And so one thing a church can do is sometimes in some churches they have a little Lenten bowl called the rice bowl, and families put that rice bowl on their table, and during Lent they put their dollars and their coins in. At the end of Lent, they might bring this rice bowl as an offering for the poor on Palm Sunday or Easter. Well, what you can do is something like that, where you put together these family giving cans, and they're cardboard. They have tin at the bottom. They have a tin lid at the top. The lids come off, and there's a slot. And you can brand it with your church label, your church name, and you can give these giving cans to people, and you let them take them home during the week, and they put their dollars and their coins in the can, and at the offertory time, at the offering time, you have them bring those cans forward, and you then give them new cans. So I've seen churches bring up the giving cans weekly, and I've seen churches bring up the giving cans monthly. But if they won't register, if they don't want to put their names and their vital information down any place, this is another way to get them into regular giving. So that can be very helpful for different kinds of ethnic groups. The next question is, where can we get information on stewardship renewal and increased giving? Well, lots of denominations and religious printing houses have different stewardship renewal programs. Again, they're usually 3 or 4 weeks of commitment. They've got some homily or sermon helps. They've got inserts for your newsletters or bulletins. They've got commitment cards. They've got even prayers. I always think these things have to be tailored to your community. They really have to be modified and personalized to your community. So a lot of denominations and printing houses have these. As far as an increased giving program, that is a specialized kind of animal. We at VisionWorks do that. We have a program called Gifts Multiplied. And that's where we help a church put together an annual report. That's where we have homily and sermon helps. That's where we have prayers. That's where we take care of the letters and the mailings. That's where we have the 4 weeks of commitment cards. That's a little different kind of animal, but those are the two places that you can get stewardship renewal programs or an increased giving program. Where can we get information on these giving kiosks? Also, where can we get information on these phone apps? Again, some denominations have help with the giving kiosks and the phone apps. These days, if you Google church giving kiosks or church phone apps, church giving phone apps, you can find information. And we will research this as well to find out some of the vendors and try to send you out an email with the names of some of these people that you could contact as well. And then lastly, how can we adjust our Sunday envelope plan? Well, that's usually a pretty simple process, but when you renew your contract, your church contract with your Sunday envelope company, let them know that you want to migrate away from the Sunday Giving yearly box and that you want to migrate toward a monthly packet or definitely a bi-monthly packet. And you can do this for adults and you can do this for kids as well. And so most church companies are glad to do this. It means that you have to share your church roster with them so that they can mail this out to your people each year. Those are very good questions. Well, we want to thank you very much for joining us today. We hope that some of these ideas and suggestions are helpful to you. Again, take them into yourself, mull them over with some reflection, share them with your leaders, share them with some of your key groups in your parish. Don't be afraid of taking some risks. We have to more and more take the risks, even if we're not comfortable with some of the new things that are coming about, or even if we're not comfortable with the new trends in church attendance, or even if we're not comfortable with some of the new technology, we do have to take some risks. So in the future, in the next several weeks, we're going to be working on a webinar for helping churches think about strategic planning, because this nowadays, if we want to be around, we have to plan to be around. And churches, again, just can't count on the loyalty of the people like they used to. So churches need to come up with a year and a 3 and a 5 and a 10-year plan so that people have an idea that they're moving forward, that things are happening, that this place is alive. Another webinar that we're going to sponsor is going to be a webinar on estate planning, estate gifts. Some churches and denominations do a great job with this. A lot don't. But there's some simple things that you can do to start increasing your estate gifts. And then lastly, Well, next, then we'll sponsor a webinar on capital campaigns. Some churches will be getting ready for capital campaigns mid-fall. Some churches will be looking at capital campaigns in the spring. Sometimes churches will be looking at a capital campaign in a year or two. But a question is, how do we get mobilized for this, and how much can we raise? We'll try to answer some of those questions in our webinar. So we want to thank you very much for your attendance today. I hope that this has been helpful. We will send you out an email with the PowerPoint and with a link to this video. Share it with whomever you can, whomever you'd like, and try to work this into your life of your community so that you can help your community be even stronger than it is now. Again, thank you very much for joining us today, and God's best to all of you.